I know that you're all massively excited about lunch, so I promise, as the last one before lunch, to do my best to keep you entertained. Um, this is this presentation is on my research, and I am an early career researcher exploring the role and the question around art or art therapy regarding healing in natural disaster affected communities. I would like to also just point out, without analysing it, the image that you're seeing there is actually a visual representation of my thesis, of my intended thesis. So it's informed by the Dutch Masters. I'm a visual artist as well as a registered art therapist. And my supervisor, who's absolutely brilliant, when I was stuck trying to pull together the research design, said, I want you to picture your research. And this is the image that appeared to me. So what I did was I constructed the image myself. I selected every object based on the Dutch Masters and their use of symbolic representation. And then I took a photograph. I took approximately 60 photographs and I put it together, chose the one that resonated, and then I drew it. And that is, you are looking at my research. So everything there represents an element of so there's ethics represented, there's grounded theory, there's community, there's lived experience, but we'll get on to all of that. So firstly, in Australia, we are going through something called a reconciliation. We understand that we have severely damaged Indigenous people by white settlement, and it's something quite close to my heart. And so what we do when we start presentations is we do an acknowledgement to country. So I'd like to acknowledge that this presentation was actually written on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, who are the First Nation owners of where I dwell. So Kaurna country is the area that white settlement calls Adelaide, South Australia. And I take this moment to pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge their relationship and spiritual connection to land, waterways and skies. May we all honour Indigenous people across the globe and clans from all the spaces from where we dwell and where we come from. So today what we're going to look at is I'm going to provide you with some definitions and glossaries of terms regarding the terms that are relevant to natural disasters. I'm going to do a sensitivity acknowledgement. We'll get on to that. I'll give you a background, contextual review, lived experience and looking at some of the gaps. A little bit of a literature review regarding arts engagement and natural disasters, a literature review regarding creative art therapies and natural disasters, ethics of care and why it matters. And then if we've got time, I'm hoping I don't talk too long, I'd like to do a small experimental engagement session. So first things first, when we start talking about natural disasters, you are very, very hard pushed to find literature that does not involve the word resilience. So for the purpose of my research, I define resilience as the capacity to bounce back from adversity. And obviously because adversity is so linked to natural disasters, it makes sense that there's a lot of literature about it. I'm going to argue that that's actually not the way we should be focusing, but I'll get on to that. Ethics of care. So what we know about ethics is that ethics is really grounded in quite patriarchal, logical reasoning. And so ethics of care is born out of a feminist framework where we say that actually you cannot make an ethical, rational decision outside of the context of relationships. So my relationships will inform how my ethics are actually engaged. The common example that is used is it right to steal medicine? No, it's not. Is it right to steal medicine when the person that I'm stealing it for is my closest friend or my partner? And then we suddenly find ourselves in this really interesting space about how do we define right and wrong and what is ethics of care and how does it actually matter? So I'm going to talk about that just a little bit in relation to how it relates to natural disasters. Trauma-informed care I'll get onto in the next slide. Can I just ask, who is aware of trauma-informed care? Yep. Okay, good, so I don't need to go heaps into it. All right. I'm going to also define directly affected and indirectly affected. So for the purpose of my research, I define directly affected as someone who actively lives or works in a town or a community that is directly affected by a natural disaster. They do not have to have lost their home or lost property, but they have to reside or work in that space. Arts engagement, for the purpose of research, is any type of creative expression or practice. And then creative art therapy, I don't need to define because we all know what that is, and we've had lots of definitions already. So trauma-informed care and practice, I will just quickly run through what the basic principles are. So what we understand about trauma is that we understand it disrupts our sense of safety and our capacity to have equilibrium within ourselves and within our communities. So when we start talking about trauma-informed care, we understand that we need to be safe, we need to be trustworthy and transparent about how we do things. We need to acknowledge that peer support and mutual self-help is a really valuable element to recovery. There's collaboration and mutuality. There's empowerment, voice and choice, that people are actually empowered to make the decisions that matter around their lives. My undergrad is in social work, and in social work, one of the founding principles that I really loved was we learnt that information is knowledge, knowledge is power, power is choice, choice is change. You cannot change unless you're informed. And I think that that is really important when we start talking about what does it mean to help people engage with their power regarding their experiences. And that there are cultural, historical and gender issues that we need to be aware of that inform how we engage with people. So I'm just going to pause for a second and just say this is my sensitivity acknowledgement, and say that given my definition around directly infected and indirectly affected, I'd like to acknowledge that natural disasters are a global phenomenon. And there may be some people in the room that are directly affected, and there are also some people in the room that may identify as indirectly affected. And that might be that, you know, you weep over a news report. It might be that you volunteer for the UN. It might be, you know, that you donate to Red Cross, okay? So I think that we just need to acknowledge that this is part of it. So in this space, I'd like to also acknowledge that respect and trauma-informed care principles apply. What you're actually looking at there is an image of my father's property. So I am indirectly affected, and I will just... So basically my father is, my stepfather, as you know, is directly affected. So this has actually informed my interest in this research, being indirectly affected. So this brings us to the contextual review. So I like to think of how this research found me and not the other way around. So in Australia, September 2019 to February 2020, Australia experienced the Black Summer bushfires. We lost across Australia over 17 million hectares. It affected 50% of our territories, 83%, so 5 out of 6 of our states. The estimated loss is over 1 billion animals, more than 800 million in New South Wales, and it's actually classified as the worst wildlife disaster in our history. We lost over nearly 4,000 homes, and it is the worst in history. It's the combined loss of 2 of our major bushfires, the Black Saturday of 2009 and Ash Wednesday in 1983. And the scientific recommendations are that we need to invest 16 billion to avoid flora and fauna extinction. So this is a significant impact on us as a nation. Drilling down, the effect on South Australia specifically, what you're looking at is Kangaroo Island. Kangaroo Island exists off the Fleurieu Peninsula, south of South Australia, and we lost 49% of the island. So the actual stats, They lost they lost lives, wildlife, housing, and primary industry production. So they're a big logging community, over 21,000 hectares of land, and like I said, 49% of the island. I'd like to also just quickly say that when there is a significant fire, the level of government intervention regarding support and recovery is dependent on the amount of damage that's been done. Now, I don't know if that's globally, but I know that's the case for South Australia. So at the same time that this fire happened, there was also a breakout in the Yorke Peninsula, which got minimum government support, mainly because it lost a high number of homes. And there was also one in the southeast of South Australia which didn't get any government support at all because it was deemed too small. So you can understand that that community felt quite devastated by the fact that they didn't get the same level of support. Moving on to a different space, you are looking at the Adelaide Hills. So this is a picture of the Adelaide Hills fire scar. You can see here over to the left-hand side where metropolitan Adelaide is. And so we're actually only talking about 35 to 45 minutes outside of the CBD. So we're talking about a really big fire that happened quite close to metropolitan Adelaide. So in terms of the Adelaide Hills, which is where... Central Business District, thank you. So in South Australia, in the Adelaide Hills, we lost 23,000 hectares. It travelled across 3 different council regions, so it affected quite different council populations. We lost 83 homes and we had 1 fatality, but we also had a series of suicides post-fires, and there's an unknown element of whether or not they were directly related to the impact of the fires or whether they were just suicides. So I would contend that they are related, but who knows? So, into the contextual review. So like I said, this is an image of my dad's property. In June 2019, we lost my mum. So she died unexpectedly in the June, and you're looking at the December. So my mum's ashes were in the family home, and my father was working in metropolitan CBD, Adelaide. And when he heard about the fires, he made a decision to drive home because my mum's ashes were in the house. And my dad lives on quite a big property, 2.5 acres. So he drove home to fight the fires. We lost my mum's orchard, which is what you're looking at there. We lost her vegetable garden and her tenderness to land, but my dad saved the family home, and the fire came within 3 metres of the house. So it was very, very close. So as a visual artist and as a fully qualified art therapist, I obviously did my own art and art therapy engagement to process what was happening for me. So I'm going to show you some images. I used prose. So we are not islands, neither are our experiences. Everything is connected, and one of the saving graces of the loss of mum is she never had to see firsthand the loss of the land she tended so well. I console myself with this tiny piece of justice. This is me. This is called Dancing with the Flames. So this was one of my creative art therapy pieces. And this is a poem I wrote. A fire tore through the hills, eating everything it could find, an insatiable hunger, feeding off the land and hard work of people, without prejudice, dining greedily on every patch and leaf. Then it was gone. Dissipated itself unto itself, folding its arms of satisfaction around its swollen self in victory. Within its swollen belly consumed your orchard, vegetables softly tended, apples, pears, plums, cherries, fed the insatiable as flames spanned deep and wide, licking every morsel from its universal fingers of disastrous inequality. So, building the picture of how I then arrived to this space, because obviously I managed to process my own trauma through the use of arts and also creative art therapy. So one of the really interesting things for me was that my arts engagement operated as a comforting space for healing. It afforded opportunity for processing concepts, and it was a safe expression for imagining an alternative future, like Bessel van der Kolk talks about. And my training as an art therapist meant I found the arts offering sensory processing, facilitating self-regulation, and assisting with shifts in my perception to create new meaning regarding my experience. So in very real ways, both the arts and creative art therapies supported my recovery. So I then went on to get a role working in community engagement in bushfire recovery. So what I discovered in this was that people were already doing lives when life happened, right? So they were already managing traumas and managing events. I had one man whose wife was dying of brain cancer, and then he lost all of his stock and they lost everything. So, you know, like people were doing real life when real life happened. And one of the things that I noticed about this was this emerging idea around resilience. And like I said, a lot of the literature around resilience is there. And what I explored with community engagement was I discovered that people were actually inherently resilient. They were already resilient because they were managing brain cancer, they were managing complex lives and divorces, and like my father, they were managing loss and grief and other events. And so I was like, well, hold on a tick, why is all of the natural disaster recovery focused on teaching resilience when I would argue we're all resilient, we're all here? So this created this real gap in the literature for me. I was like, this doesn't make sense. So what the synthesis of emerging curiosities was, in the conversations that I had, not one person in South Australia asked for art therapy. Not one person. They asked for creative art groups to connect and recover, and they asked for mental health services, but there was no, like if you picture a Venn diagram, there was no overlapping space in that. And I was like, but hold on a tick, like I've done both of these and it works. So why is no one asking for this? So that is how my curiosity got sparked, and this is how I landed in the space of deciding that this was a good research project. So current literature. The question is, how do we know what we know, and what is the value of lived experience in that space? So for me, like, I use the definition of lived experience as people who have lived through an experience are the only ones who can educate about what that experience is and what that experience needs and what you need for recovery from that experience. And so the lived experience of artists through the Adelaide Hills was actioned through an arts engagement lens, but not a creative art therapy lens. So I didn't know what was happening, and I still don't. That's the nature of grounded theory. Does everyone here know what grounded theory is? Yeah? Just quickly, like, so a lot of research is you have a hypothesis and you test that hypothesis, you go right. But grounded theory says I actually have no hypothesis. I don't know what's happening here, so I'm going to let the data and the people that are involved, like, form the theory, which is very exciting. So lived experience is incredibly valuable and necessary in this space. So the literature review regarding arts engagement. So literature highlights the effectiveness of arts-based interventions. It has positive effects on health, stress, emotional regulation, social connectedness, and other illnesses. Specific arts-based approaches include writing, painting, drawing, dance, music, and they've all demonstrated positive health effects. So in case you don't know, the World Health Organisation in 2019 commissioned a major review on the role of the arts in health. If you get onto their website, you can read it. And it was based on over 3,000. It's a literature review based on over 3,000 studies. So it's quite expansive, and it demonstrates that the arts have benefit across the lifespan. So it's quite big. So research highlights the potential of arts engagement. Overall, there is a promise for initiatives that engage artists and communities in arts-based activities following traumatic events such as natural disasters, which can positively affect health. So I'll make a quick note here that these are two of the localised projects. So the top one, it was a... and this isn't art therapy, this is just arts engagement. So the top one is badges of honour and badges of strength. So what people identified as their strength to navigate through the bushfires. And the bottom one is new art for new walls. So I'd like to point out that Tina is bushfire affected. And for those of you that don't know, it takes a long time to recover from a natural disaster, not only physically but in terms of infrastructure. So Tina lost her property, and she only had her house rebuilt last October. So she was homeless for 4 years. So that's a significant period of time. I just put down there globally there is something called the Creative Recoveries Network, which are focused on looking at how arts support people globally. If you are interested, I really recommend, if you're interested in trauma recovery with children in natural disasters, I recommend one of their programs, projects called, have a look through it, you can YouTube it, it's called Teaspoons of Light. And what they did was they got in a classroom and they presented a narrative about a story about a girl who had lost something, and they said, like, let's build in what this girl needs. And the last thing that was suggested was this girl needed a teaspoon of light. And so they called it the Teaspoon of Light Project. But I really recommend you have a look at it if you're interested in this topic. So this is an image of Belinda. And I have full consent to use these, obviously. Belinda and her husband lost their home. They are both artists, long-term artists, both in their 70s and 80s. And they lost everything. They lost both their art studios. They lost all of their artworks. They lost everything. And this is Belinda drawing on the walls of Fabric, which is a local community arts heritage place. And she is drawing this with the charcoal from her burnt home. Belinda is also a poet, and she wrote an amazing poetry book called Echidnas Don't Live Here Anymore, because they had a pet echidna. And she dedicated the book, and she said, my dedication is to Mother Nature. May she make a lyre of this title. So there's some really great ways that the arts are helping people in the Adelaide Hills. So just a quick note, I don't want to go too deeply into this, but there is an emerging field called neuroaesthetics. I'm unsure if people are aware of it, but you can have a look at it. But basically what it is looking at how our brains actually respond to art, not only doing art, but also viewing art. And based on some of the research that's coming out, they have said 1 or more art experiences a month can extend your life by up to 10 years. So, literature review, creative art therapy. So in the past 20 years, we've had an increasing growth in our understanding of the efficacy of creative art therapy for different demographics and situations. And basically what is emerging is that we still don't know a lot about the role of creative art therapy. There's a lot of qualitative data, but there is very little quantitative data in the creative art therapy space in relation to natural disasters. I'd like to quickly run through a case study. Can you make... I've got 5. Blimey, Charlie, that went fast. Okay. I won't go into the case study. I'll keep moving because I really would like to just explore the ethics of care. So one of the things that I'd like to bring to the table is that when we start talking about natural disasters, we acknowledge that nature is central to that. And art materials, where do they come from? Nature. So I think that there is a really tangible space where we might explore ethics of care based on Indigenous ethics of care. So Indigenous ethics of care says we are all equal. So we are no better than a rock or a twig or a tree, that we are literally equal with everything. And so if we adopt that perspective and you look at the pencils on your table and understand that they come from nature, how might we work with nature to process our trauma around nature? So I think there's a really interesting kind of space there. So bringing it all together. So obviously lived experience, trauma-informed care and ethics of care are really central to this. I'm curious about how they're situated in creative art therapy, and the big question of can arts engagement hold the same space? So I think one of the things that I haven't said is, this is a piece that I did in processing. It's called Pedagogical Tensions, and the reason for that is because also this research, the goal of it is it's coming through a public pedagogy lens. So what that means is public pedagogy is where we learn outside of formal institutions. So right now, we're not in a formal educational setting, but you just learnt the term public pedagogy. So case in point. So what I'm hoping from this research is that we, based on the lived experience and the participatory action research of the people involved, that we will come together with a theory that actually can then inform future disaster-affected communities. So I am going to give you, can I give everyone just 2 minutes? Is that okay? Are you all fine to do that? Okay. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to just grab hold of the pencils and just kind of like hold them. Don't do anything with them, but just hold a pencil or the packet or an eraser, anything that you just want to. And I want you to take a moment to think about where this pencil came from. Like, we don't know what country it came from. We don't know which part of this earth. Yeah, usually China. Yeah, usually China. Thank you. And the fact that the land that this pencil came from has probably experienced a natural disaster. And so I'd like you to just, in your own time, just reflect on your own experience of being directly or indirectly affected. And as you hold that pencil, you can use your dominant or your non-dominant hand. If people feel stuck, quite often I will say use your non-dominant hand so you bypass the brain's sense of needing to be perfect. But just go with it. Just thank the pencil while you consider how disasters have had an impact on your life. For the sake of time, I'll ask you to just wind that up, just whatever it is that you're doing. And as a final note on that, I'd just like you to identify what's happening in your body, not your mind, because we know that trauma is embodied. So just notice your relationship and your context of natural disasters in your life, and yeah, just how that sits for you. Would you be happy to speak to what happened yesterday? Would you like to speak about what we did at all, or not? You don't have to. It's an invitation. Would you like to speak to it? Yeah, sure. Yep, absolutely. So in closing, I would like to say, when you want to bring your chair over. In closing, I'd like to say that I had the absolute privilege of Rosemary helping me with my demonstration last night. And it was incredibly serendipitous that Rosemary is actually affected. So I would just like to invite you to just maybe share how the art therapy that we did, the demonstration that we did last night, just what emerged for you in terms of that.
Okay, so Dee very successfully embraced the whole concept of embodiment of trauma and asked me to think about the event, which was we lost everything we own and worked for all our lives in 2023 in a flood. And as far as injustice is concerned, it was man-made, so it could have been prevented. And literally everything we own. I don't have my certificates or my papers or any photos. Anything from the past is pretty much gone. Just by the way, the shoes I have on here, they were underwater for a month, and then they came out and I dyed them blue so that I can use them again because I love them. Yeah, so she embraced the whole concept of embodiment and asked me to think about the event and where I feel it in my body. So basically I showed her, and from there on she instructed me to, yeah, put my hand there and grab a hold of it. Help me right if I remember wrong. My brain is, yeah. And she asked me to literally try and pull it from the body, and it brought literally a physical feeling of the heaviness and the sadness. Look, it came back, so I need a few more sessions of that. So just now to speak about it, I feel completely overwhelmed by the situation. So yeah, and then we basically removed it further away from me. And at what point did we start drawing it?
So what I invited Rosemary to do was picture the colour of what was happening for her, and then we moved, so we worked in a multimodal way. We worked with the body, but then we moved into an art space, and then Rosemary drew, and then we drew her, then I invited her to also imagine where her grief was located in her body, and then she drew her grief, and then we invited dialogue between those two images. And what Rosemary chose to do was hand her grief over to one of the images. And then I invited her to explore what she then wanted to do with those images. And she said, I just want to move it away. One of the other things that I did throughout the session was I captured keywords phenomenologically. So I didn't analyse what she was doing. I captured an image, like a snapshot of like blue line, yellow, like actual descriptive. And meanwhile also interspaced it with what she was saying. So this actually I am pulling together into what's called an intersubjective response and offering back to Rosemary as a poem that she can take away with her. With your permission, would you like me to read it, or would you? It's
I'm just helping her here. So just to, I think, just to make it very clear, she used all the words I used while I was busy, and she is writing a poem for me about that. I hope you understood that, because I think it's very important, because it's so powerful for me that she's doing that. Sorry.
No, thank you. It's close enough. Long arches. I use my body. Overlapping circles. Angelic figure. Up and down, outwards. Loose, light lines. Stretched out, ready to embrace. Where the water was, she's moving forward. And stretched out, friendly. It's okay. It will be okay. I'm hearing her. Loose yellow, fast moving, ready to embrace it. And that's about it. She's solidly grounded. Heavy black, fast circles, round and round. I'm feeling very good. Not white, just black. Leave it with me. And that concludes it. So thank you for your time. And I realise that going through a presentation when you're not particularly interested in the topic is, challenging. But thank you. You've been great to do that. So thanks. Any questions?
Thank you for sharing your experience and the special experience of going through that kind of thing. It is your father, but it's very close. So I would almost recommend that you are in a space where you can say that you are directly impacted as well. It is your mother, her ashes, her orchard, and so I just want to suggest that because I can totally relate.
I think also one of the things I didn't say and probably should have said is that obviously my position in this research is as an insider-outsider, so I'm bringing my own autoethnographic experience just to compare and contrast and add that kind of, and also because no one asked for creative art therapy, like what's happening here. The other thing that I'd like to say just quickly about my dad was he was up behind the shed. There'd been a spark that had landed in a backfield, and he was up behind the shed, taking care of that with the hose. And meanwhile, the CFS, our Country Fire Services, had been called to a home, a property on his road, and got the wrong address. And they came up his driveway, and there was a fire coming up the front of the house that he didn't know about because he was behind the shed at the back. And so he came out from fighting the fire behind to find 4 firefighters in his driveway fighting a fire. And he's like, "What are you doing here?" And they're like, "Where did you come from?" And so that there was that real tension of potentially having lost my father as well. So, and even though he's my stepfather, he's my dad. Water is thicker than blood sometimes. So yeah, it was quite a big experience. So, yeah. Any questions? No? Comments? No? All right, enjoy your lunch. Sorry I went over time.